Hi, I'm Steve Hassan, and I'm absolutely honored to have with me James Scaminaci III. James, I'm a fan of your work. My friend Frederick Clarkson introduced me to your work, and I've read you and incorporated your work in the Cult of Trump. And I just feel so like it's so imperative that the public understand what psyops are and fourth generation warfare, and who better than you to explain it. So, without further ado, take it away, James. What do you think people need to understand?
I think what people need to understand is that it is a very sophisticated psychological warfare strategy. And it is designed to destroy the United States, quite simply. And to understand, most people, we understand conflict as one state against another state, United States versus whoever, Soviet Union, whatever. You can understand it state to state. This is a non-state actor. Okay, there's no state. And a non-state actor, and William Lind is the one who came up with fourth generation warfare based on previous looks at various kinds of conflicts. And William Lind was the director of cultural conservatism at the Free Congress Foundation, which was the strategic think tank of the Christian right, headed by Paul Weyrich. And Weyrich's goal was to destroy the United States as we know it. And he was doing fourth generation warfare before William Lind came from the Pentagon to the Free Congress Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But Lind leads a kind of double life in the sense that he writes his fourth generation warfare studies in the US Marine Corps Gazette.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to Department of Defense audiences. And so there's a whole audience of people who know Lind solely from his sort of like legitimate hat.
Right.
The Marine Corps Gazette, and they take his ideas seriously, which you should do. But then there's another side of William Lind, and it's not that he hid it, but people don't look for it or they don't want to find it. And that is where he's talking about how you destroy the United States.
But
And
you
it's
destroy it as a republic that wants to have separation of church and state and
exactly.
follow the Constitution.
Exactly. So you have to understand that William Lind, when he's writing this, he is writing it for a strategic think tank that is out to destroy the United States. And Paul Weyrich didn't hide it. What gets hidden is that the journalists covering the Christian right and Paul Weyrich sort of overlook it. They just, let it just go like over their head, like, oh no, we don't want to talk about this. But that's what they're doing.
Right. And for me, I've been studying brainwashing and mind control for 40 years. So I know all the literature about how to ready the mind for brainwashing. You unfreeze, you disorient, you overload, you confuse, you create dissonance within the person's identity, and you set them up for a new set of beliefs to come in.
Yeah, and in your book, I think you have a section on Newt Gingrich. It's been a while since I read it, but
I have a whole thing on the Christian right. I
yeah,
mentioned Newt Gingrich, yes.
but the point of Newt Gingrich was he's this third grade history professor at some college that nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
He gets to Washington, D.C., and who does he hook up with? Paul Weyrich. Weyrich schools him on using rhetoric to delegitimize the Democratic Party. And he is introducing terms of like they're traitors and, all sorts of other things, that welfare is wrong, that, there's a whole litany of words that they use to delegitimize the Democratic Party as a legitimate political party in the United States and to delegitimize liberalism as a governing philosophy. And that becomes, from the 1990s onward, the Republican Party. And Newt Gingrich gets it from Paul Weyrich.
Mm-hmm.
who's also getting ideas on how to conduct political warfare from William Lind, who, not to complicate things for your audience, okay, but you sort of have to understand where this is coming from and why it's so dangerous. Lind was in the orbit of John Boyd.
Mm-hmm.
John Boyd is like America's top strategist, bar none. He's the guy in
And
the
when you say
Pentagon.
strategist, what do you mean?
He devised a
Military
variety of,
strategist
he
or?
devised a variety of strategies.
Uh-huh.
And he was known for giving 4, 5, 6 hour briefings in the Pentagon, which were unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he's describing how you conduct warfare. And it goes through a lot of iterations. But one of the iterations that it gets down to was the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. And if you read John Boyd's biography, his biographers, Boyd thought that this was one of the most dangerous things he had ever developed. And the reason it was dangerous is because it is a war for your mind.
Mm-hmm.
It is a war for your mind. It is a war for your perceptions of reality. And if what your book does, and what other people have talked about, like the professor Murkieka, I can't pronounce her name. Anyway, the Demagogue for President book, is how you get into your mind and virtually destroy it, destroy your perceptions of reality. And Boyd talks about in one of his long briefings, it gets to the end of it, how this is so dangerous of images and audio coming into your mind and overwhelming you.
Right.
And Lind takes this, and Lind was in the orbit. In fact, when Lind wrote his first article for the Marine Corps Gazette, one of the biographies of John Boyd said Boyd was talking to one of the guys who was co-authoring the article.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Laying out the principles of fourth generation warfare. So it's a very dangerous thing that they're doing.
So if I may, James, for the lay audience, just to make it really more explanatory, why would anyone put Betsy DeVos, who's a Amway multi-level marketing person, in charge of education when she doesn't believe in public education?
Okay, so let's go back, a little history, not much, just a little history.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody knows Richard Hofstadter's book, The Paranoid Style in American Politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good book. But he wrote 3 iterations of that book because he knew he wasn't getting it right.
Mm.
He wrote this article like in the 50s, in the 60s, and in the 60s he wrote it again. He wrote like 3 different versions of the article. And each time he kept saying, there's something missing. I got something wrong. And in one of the articles, he actually says that. He has a footnote. He goes, I didn't put something in here that I really should have put in there. And what he missed was his real book that everybody should read is called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, that book.
Okay.
And there's a section on there, and he has a little bit of blurbs about Billy Graham. Everybody looks at Billy Graham as, some kind of grandfatherly guy, saving souls, blah, blah, blah. But to Hofstadter, Billy Graham was God and religion superseded science and reason and philosophy.
Right.
And Rousas Rushdoony of the Christian Reconstructionists picks this up and launches his attack, the first attack on American education.
Mm-hmm.
And the Christian Reconstructionists go after the schools, after the education system, and Betsy DeVos picks it up and becomes the 4-star general, as Rachel Tabachnik writes about her. She becomes the 4-star general of the movement to destroy public schools. And then Trump puts her into the Department of Education secretary. It is a long strategy, but yet you read the journalists and they only go back just a few years. They don't see that this is a deliberate strategy to destroy a major institution, what
Right.
your children learn.
So, a question I have for you, because I get asked it, is does Trump know what he's doing, or is he an imbecile? And for me, it seems like there are people influencing him to do these things quite deliberately, to sow chaos, to overwhelm the media, to capture media attention, because that's one of the essential things about mind control is controlling someone's attention. And if their attention is on you, even if they think you're crazy, their attention is still on you. And therefore, that's why all demagogues and cult leaders, their biggest fear is to be forgotten versus being hated or feared.
You
That's,
know, I don't get into the mind necessarily of Donald Trump. I mean, Mary Trump, I haven't read Mary Trump's book, but my impression of Donald Trump is, first of all, he is an imbecile.
hmm,
He really is stupid. But he is like one of these really street smart, savvy guys who knows how to get attention, knows how to manipulate people. He's a predator.
yes.
Okay.
I
He's
agree
just
with all of that. He's
yeah,
uneducated,
and
but I don't think he's an imbecile.
well,
But he's uneducated for sure.
yeah, he when I say he's an imbecile, it's that he really has no coherent thinking for anything. I mean, I remember the days, you could disagree with Richard Nixon,
Hmm.
but Richard Nixon could have a cogent conversation, discussion about why he was doing so. You could disagree with him 100%,
Right.
but you understood why he was doing so. Donald Trump is merely he can't get beyond stringing together some adjectives and nouns and verbs in a random pattern.
Yeah, he really does fit the stereotypical profile of a cult leader. But
Yeah,
this isn't about my book. This is about you. What do you want to tell the media that's been covering him, how they should do things, what they should be actually focusing on and
he.
helping people understand?
I think what they should focus on is that his base is the white evangelical fundamentalist base of the Republican Party.
Hmm.
And it's not just the base. Those are the voters, but those are the people who lick the stamps and get the envelopes out and all that kind of stuff and make the phone calls. There's an entire infrastructure that has built this base. It's a $5 billion infrastructure.
Yep.
It incorporates Heritage Foundation, the Alliance Defending Freedom. Fox News is influenced by it. It's a $5 billion infrastructure. It's an information warfare infrastructure. It's coordinated.
Yes.
And they don't hide that it's coordinated. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. They have the Wednesday meeting, the Tuesday morning meeting, the Thursday afternoon meeting. They coordinate strategy. They coordinate talking points. They give them to the Republicans on Capitol Hill. Those guys go on Fox News or Limbaugh and talk about it. I mean, it's a coordinated information warfare operation going on by the Christian right and its allies.
And I should say that Fred Clarkson told me about the Manhattan Declaration, this historic
Mhm.
coming together of Catholic right wing and Protestant right wing to collaborate on politics against women's rights to choose, gay rights, and to advance freedom of religion, which means their version of religion.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. Frederick Clarkson knows more about the Christian right than I do, and I don't pretend. I mean, I learned a lot from
And me too.
Clarkson. But if you think about one thing, like the mantra that they go, you can't trust the media. That message is in the Christian right, It's in the Republican Party. It's in the Tea Party. It's in the Patriot Militia. It's in the white supremacists. You know, they all have the same message. You can't trust the media.
The mainstream media. Trust
The
their
mainstream
media.
media. You can't trust the mainstream media,
Right.
which means, like in your book, that's one of the things that happens in a cult where you cut people off from information. Now, you think about the OODA loop of John Boyd. If you had multiple sources of information coming at you, you could say, well, what does the New York Times say? What does the Washington Post say? Oh, yeah, what does Fox News say? What's Limbaugh saying about this? But they go, no, no, no. Don't listen to the Washington Post. Don't read the New York Times. Don't read the Atlantic magazine. Only trust these guys. Your OODA loop has now collapsed. Your perception of reality is one way, and they are now controlling you. They don't have to pull the strings on you. They're making it so that you only perceive a part of reality.
And that's how all cults are, by the way. All authoritarian cults say, don't talk to ex-members, listen to critics. You know, they're persecuting us. It's Satan. Satan is out there trying to, you know, trip up God's plan to save the planet.
Well, that was the genius of your book, of showing how these cult indicators apply into the Republican Party, etc. Mm. I don't know the cult indicators as well as you do, because I mean, that's your living. Right. But if you look at the cult indicators, you see that what they're doing is delegitimizing everything outside. Right. And now, if you're just a UFO cult, 15 people, it's like no big deal. Everybody can laugh. If you're the Christian right and you have a $5 billion information warfare apparatus, you can't laugh at that.
No, and it's not going to go away even if Trump is defeated.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm not pet peeve, but you know, it's like they call it like Trumpism. Mm-hmm. But Trumpism is the logical conclusion of a process that started in the 1950s.
Yep.
And there's no indication that it's going to stop.
Right.
I mean, Mike Pence is only a more sort of like benign, suitable guy you could invite to dinner, whereas Trump is going to burp and fart at the table.
But as I learned from Jeffrey Charlotte, Mike Pence was recruited into the family by Chuck Colson, and they have been interfering with politics for 80 years.
Oh, yeah, no. The point I was going to make was it's not Trumpism, because Trump and Pence would be pursuing basically the same policies. It's only that Pence is somebody you could say, oh, he looks presidential. Oh, he acts presidential, right? In the meantime, he would be gutting Social Security, Medicare. He would be, you know, his whole worldview is that the more pain, the better.
Right.
You know, Trump is the only thing that Trump is just this eruptive id that doesn't hide anything.
So, James, I haven't seen you on mainstream media. What would you say if you were, you know, if you had an audience of millions of Americans about what's been going on?
I would say we are in the late stages of a political war to destroy the United States as we have known it. Mm-hmm. And you can look at Trump ending the Second Republic, but think about, let me just give a small history lesson.
Yep, please.
So my mentor at Stanford was Marty Lipset. And Lipset wrote a book in the 1960, called Political Man. And one of the chapters in it starts off with talking about a stable government. And a stable government rests on two things: effectiveness and legitimacy. Now, effectiveness is simply delivering the goods. Mm-hmm. Is the economy going? Do you have social mobility? Can you get into school? Do you have a good job? Income, blah, blah, blah. It's just, can you deliver the goods?
Right.
Legitimacy is, are your values consistent with the government's values, the society's values? That makes stability.
Right.
right? And then Marty writes, and he's writing in a time in 1960 where you're getting peasant rebellions, you're getting liberation movements, you're getting working class politics that was still fairly radical at that time. So his thinking was, well, the conservative elites have to accept these new actors, these peasants, these workers,
Mm.
and if the church and the landed aristocracy accept it, then you have a stability, right? But that model is the same today. So you take Frederick Clarkson. Clarkson's work says, what do these guys really believe? They believe, and Clarkson has written so eloquently on this, they believe America was founded as a Christian nation, meaning
Yeah. Which it wasn't.
but the point is, the country you think you live in doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist.
Right.
It's illegitimate.
Right.
The separation of church and state is a hoax, meaning the rule of law that you think is legitimate is illegitimate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the level they're working at.
Right, because they want power and control.
They want power, and that's, if you'd say, what is it you would tell the media? I would tell the media, you are covering in real time a political war to destroy the United States, specifically destroy the legitimacy of the federal government, the legitimacy of the US Constitution, the legitimacy of the rule of law, the legitimacy of science and evidence.
Right.
And when those things are gone, and you can read Timothy Snyder, you can read all the books, when those things are gone, the United States is destroyed.
Well, authoritarianism takes over. And
yeah, but the United States is destroyed.
yeah. So, but is it too late, or can people
No.
actually say, you know what, if we've got to roll up our sleeves and we need a counter strategy instead of just lamenting? Can you believe Trump doesn't have a national policy about COVID? Go, of course he wants chaos, he wants division, he wants this to happen in terms of fourth generation warfare. What are we going to do about it?
Well, one of the ways you do is to undermine their own legitimacy straightforwardly. For example, the media has all these articles about after Trump, right? Like there's a debate about the future of the Republican Party, blah, 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 who can lead in, Mitt Romney, some guy from, Maryland that nobody's ever heard of, and they're acting as if this is like a horse race, like who can do it. And really, the legitimacy of the Republican Party can be threatened by just simply asking a very simple question, and and pressing them on it constantly until they give you an answer. Are Black voters legitimate participants in the political system?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question of power. Do Blacks get an equal voice to vote in this democracy? Mm-hmm. Because the Republican Party is founded on not doing that. Not founded because Abraham Lincoln obviously founded it to actually give Blacks a voice. But the modern Republican Party, going back to Barry Goldwater, was...
There's also Latinos and immigrants too,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. But I'm just using Black voters because that's the fulcrum point.
The core.
And that's where they appeal to the white supremacists.
Right.
And that is, you undermine their legitimacy. It's not a debate about whether Romney can take over or some other guy can take over and make nice and look presidential. It is, what are you going to do with the fundamental question of power? Are Black voters legitimate voters or not? And if they're legitimate voters, then the demand to the Republican Party is, then you have to do something about gerrymandering, voter ID laws, early voting, protecting protect the security of the electoral infrastructure. There are whole sorts of issues that become indicators. Yeah. And it's not simply that, well, this guy is like really moderate and he's really nice. No, you demand an answer to a question that goes to their fundamental legitimacy. The modern Republican Party from 1964 onward catered to white supremacists.
Yeah. I have another angle to add to that. I think your point is spot on, by the way. But I have another point, which is there are what I call legitimate Christian, ministers, pastors who actually believe in Jesus Christ as turn the other cheek, and as you do the least in my kingdom, you do to me. They need to be amplified, and they need to criticize these prosperity ministers, the New Apostolic Reformation. You were mentioning the Christian Reconstructionists,
Mhm.
because Orthodox Christians, the ones that I know, say that's not theology. That's not recognized Christian theology.
Yeah, but that to me, I mean, I respect it. I mean, I have told atheists that look, atheists are only like maybe 10 to 20% of the society, and if you're going
Hmm.
to win an election, you got to get 51%, which means you're going to have Orthodox Methodists and mainline
Sure.
Protestants and some Catholics and Jews and Muslims all on your side. They all believe in God, and you're going to have to just whatever you think of religion, you're just going to have to tolerate the fact that your allies are really religious. I have no problem with that. I really don't care.
Hmm.
But here's what happens: the discussion of whether it's a legitimate Christianity is pointless. Of course, it's a legitimate Christianity. They're all legitimate. You can't point to anything. There's no religious scholar can say, oh, that's an illegitimate form of Christianity. Seriously? How?
I,
How are
I
you going to
would
decide that?
I have an angle,
Yeah, but
but
you
this
don't.
isn't about my interview. But I really believe legitimate religious experience there shouldn't be used. People should not be lied to and deceptively recruited. They the Universal Declaration of Human Rights need to be in play and not cult mind
Yes,
control.
but that's not religion. That's psychological manipulation you're
Well,
talking about.
it's a cult that's using religious veneer,
Right.
saying we have tax exemption, but it's really not. It's really about power and control, not about
But what'll
spirituality.
happen? What'll happen is the reason these discussions don't resonate with me is that it will become one guy saying, well, Romans blah 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 is this, and another guy saying, well, yeah, but if you read Matthew 23, and the discussion
No,
become.
no,
I've
that's not
seen it
my
on
angle.
TV.
I'm
I've
Jewish
seen it,
anyway, by the way, but no, that's not my angle. Anyway,
but
but let's come back to you. So, fourth generation warfare. You've made the point utterly clear that they want to destroy America as we know it.
mm,
They want to impose their version of America, that it was founded as a Christian nation, that it's illegitimate, that we should have separation of church and state, and all beliefs, all religious beliefs are respected and welcome and
mm,
such. So you said we need to delegitimize them. So what else do we need to do and to say to kind of expose this conspiracy to undo our republic?
well, I wouldn't call it a conspiracy because it's out in the open. I mean, it's not like they hide it. I mean, it can be found. They didn't hide.
The family is pretty secretive.
Yeah, the family is, but William Lynn's writings weren't.
Correct.
The
But
Christian rights.
the family goes after Democrats and Republicans and everybody too.
Yeah, the family is Jeff Charlotte wrote two really good books on the family. Great
Yep.
stuff. Great stuff. And it's at the elite level.
Yeah.
And at the elite level, I got the impression from reading Jeff Charlotte is they really don't care what the masses think, one way or the other.
It's very elite. That's true.
It's really
This
elite.
is not about empowering average person to
Right.
have rights.
Jesus plus nothing. And
Right.
then what does he have that line? It's the wolf. I can't remember the line he does with the wolf,
Yeah, no,
wolf leader or
it's
something like that.
very cynical, and
Right.
it's the opposite of
Right.
what people think of about Jesus. That's for
But the
sure.
Christian right that we do see is for the masses.
Hmm.
And that can be combated.
Hmm.
That can be combated.
Hmm. So, if you were talking to other media owners and wealthy tech people who are concerned about the future of the country, what should they do? If they have resources, if they have wealth, if they have potential media power, what's the message that needs to change? Because what I'm hearing is just a lot of shouting and name calling on both sides, and one side is more concerned about science and listening to experts and wanting to save people from COVID. But
I
what do you think?
think I think one thing that has to happen, and this is a different way of thinking about Noam Chomsky, or under George Lakoff rather, George Lakoff,
Mm-hmm.
is you need Democrats, liberals, Republicans, liberals and progressives, and maybe even some Republicans, need to put forward a vision of the country that they want to preserve and they want to move into the future to make it more perfect. You have to give them a vision, because the Christian right didn't hide it. In 1980, they came up with, when Frederick Clarkson said, well, they all agreed. What they all agreed on in 1980
Mm-hmm.
was, we need to take over the United States, and we need to make it a Christian nation, and we need to make it Christian in these ways, right? So they were laying out a vision for Christians to acknowledge and to accept.
Mm-hmm.
We need to put forward a vision that is secular and can be religious. Reverend Barber has a tremendous
Oops, you froze,
vision on the
James.
secular side, is put forward something that you can actually believe in.
Right.
Values that you go, those are my values. That's the legitimacy. I believe that.
Yep.
Democrats don't. They go, well, let's should we have worker training? What? Here's one political party out to destroy the legitimacy of the Constitution and the Democratic Party and the federal government, and you're talking about worker training instead of saying, you know what, we're all in this together. We're all Americans here. We gotta pull this thing together. We've always done this. Here's the country we want.
I totally agree with you on that. What the Trump side has, the Christian right side has, is a amped up fear of the devil and Satan, and they've whipped up with QAnon an international cabal of pedophiles and traffickers. So it's very emotional, it's visceral, and it's like, do you care about kids, James? If you care about kids, you'll join the Q revolution because they're going to overthrow all these corrupt people.
Right. So go back to the OODA loop, where everything is trying to get into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you read the psychologist, and what gets into your mind is fear and hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those two things, those are powerful emotions. And the Christian right, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, Newt Gingrich are masters at what is going to kill you,
Right.
and why you should be afraid of people.
Right. So the menace, as you said in your article, uncertainty, mistrust.
Exactly. They're amplifying menace and uncertainty. And how do you defeat that? John Boyd said, how do you defeat that? Is you have moral strength, moral courage in the face of menace. You give people something to believe in,
Mm-hmm.
something worth fighting for.
Yep.
Some values that resonate is my values and the values of this government or the values of this society resonate. I believe it and I'm willing to fight for it. Whereas you just can't go, well, we need worker training and we need some of this and we need a little bit of that. That's not going to win the fight.
Yeah, no, I agree.
If they're doing fear and hatred, you have to have a vision of where we are going.
Yeah, and the strength and the courage to stand up and call it out
Exactly.
and to speak out.
John Boyd, what Boyd did was, how do you destroy a society is you make the different factions in the society mistrust each other, fear each other, and you get them going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it just, the glue that holds us together, just, it comes unglued. And John Boyd said, how do you fight that? You have to have moral courage, moral values, moral strength. And he didn't say what it was.
Right.
John Boyd, like me, I don't care what it is. I've told people, I don't care. If Jesus gives you moral strength, good for you.
Right.
If it's believing in Karl Marx, good for you. It doesn't matter. As long as in the face of menace, you find the moral courage to stand up and fight.
Right. So the cure, or a piece of the solution in the way I see it, is correct diagnosis of what's actually happening. And if it is, as I believe it is, a psy-ops, deliberate effort to confuse, disorient, overwhelm, make people feel helpless, hopeless, to not care about voting because it doesn't matter anyway because the whole system is corrupt, right? If people buy into that, instead of understanding, wait a minute, has been many years deliberately of building this infrastructure to put forth this agenda, and we're not going to let them do it. It's our country, it's our kids, it's our climate. We need to take control of our climate.
And it's when they say, well, it's a Christian nation, it should be a Christian nation. The question to them should be, so should the Jews wear a star? Should the Muslims put a crescent on their clothes, or stamp it on their forehead? What does it mean? What do you get? It's press them. Press the logical endpoint of their philosophy, because that delegitimizes it.
Right.
If you say, well, the founders believed in Christianity, well, they believed this sort of like a deism, right. Some sort of vague creator out there. Jefferson didn't pinpoint anything. In fact, Jefferson, I'm pretty sure, didn't believe in God at all. But it's to press them on the logical endpoint. Instead of skipping past it, say, so should the Jews wear stars? The Muslims wear crescents? What should the atheists do? Should they have a brand of an A on their forehead?
Right.
What? It's the press Trump. So you want to outlaw abortion. Abortion's murder. So should the doctors be executed? How about the women? Should the women be executed? Push them to the logical point of their philosophy instead of letting them fluff it off. Yeah. Well, I'm just for the unborn. Well, who are you going to execute? Mm. If it's murder's a capital crime. So who are you going to execute? Mm. But we don't do that. We're so polite in this country. We're so polite.
Yeah, and I want to put a clarion call out to people who are just kind of dialing out because they're so overwhelmed. They're binge watching, stuff on Netflix or whatever because they can't handle.
Guilty.
Roll up our sleeves. I think it's great to disconnect too and recharge your batteries, but there are people who are truly they're numb and, in my opinion, mind controlled into believing that there's no such thing as a fact, or there's no such science is all lies, which it isn't, or every expert, somebody cheated on their wife, therefore his entire life work is invalidated. What? Excuse me?
Yeah. But, to go back of what should be done is Democrats, progressives need to have a vision of the society they want to build that is based in moral values that we can agree on. We may disagree on how to get there. We may disagree on the institutions, but the fundamental values of this society, we should be able to agree on. Mm-hmm. We should be able to agree on that, nobody should die in the street because they don't have enough money for healthcare.
Right.
And that's the argument I would have with the never Trumpers, eventually, is okay. You're never Trump, granted, great, but are we going to let people die in the street?
Well,
Is that the society we want? Is that
now
the
we're
society
looking
we
at
want?
40 million people being evicted potentially.
Exactly. Do we want young people with children evicted because they don't have money because of a pandemic they had nothing, no control over?
Right.
Is that the society we want?
Right.
You know, I was raised a Catholic, so I mean, the Catholics are part of the Catholic Church is really left wing. I mean, absolutely, really left wing, liberation theology, the whole bit.
Hmm.
The New Deal is based on almost on Catholicism. So, is that the society that Catholics want? We want to see people thrown out in the street. We want to see people without health care. Is that the Catholic vision? I don't think so. I don't think that's a Jewish vision. I don't think that's a Muslim vision.
Not at
I think
all.
I think we could get atheists, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, all to agree on what kind of society we have in terms of basic values of how we treat each other.
Yep. It's like, don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself is a good beginning point, right? And not having this notion of your superior. Ooh, you froze for a minute, Jake.
Fourth generation warfare is exactly that.
Hmm.
You know, because John Boyd, and you know, your internet connection is unstable. I don't know if that's my connection is unstable.
Yeah, I'm afraid you cut out for a second, but keep
Yeah,
talking.
everything froze. Is to go back in this fourth generation warfare is John Boyd said, and William Lynn and the Christian right and the Democrat and the Republican Party generate menace and fear and anxiety and uncertainty. And John Boyd said, you combat that with the truth. You combat that with the truth, with more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you froze again.
And in that regard, I would say the protests we're seeing now in the street, the Black Lives Matter protests, which are almost multiracial now, whites, Hispanics, blacks, you know, Asians. That's the vision. That to me is showing America and showing the Republicans what is really their quote unquote enemy.
Right. I
It's
couldn't
a
agree more.
multiracial society that wants inclusion, not exclusion.
Yep, and the Navy veteran who stood up and said, "Why are you here?" and they beat him and broke
Yeah.
his wrists.
And it's you know, the more you get, the more you see those people not being like those people, but you know, those people in the street,
Courageous people.
multiracial, showing moral courage, displaying moral values is winning.
Right.
Winning. And when they get beat up by, you know, the goon squad dressed all in black, Trump is delegitimizing his entire police force.
Yeah.
Because there are normal people out there in America going, Mabel, that's not right. Look at him beating up those women, those wall of moms. Look at him beat up that Navy veteran. You know how many Navy veterans are out here? You know, what are they beating that guy up for? What did he do? And
Right.
all of a sudden it goes, you know what? What they're doing, what their values are, is not the same as my values. That's wrong. And when at that point, you're winning. You're winning and Boyd had another argument, and this is what Americans ought to understand.
Please.
Is conflict occurs at various levels. All right, there's the physical level, right? I punch you in the nose. Fair enough. I knock you out. I win. But depends on how I do it, or where it's done, I lose. You think I'm immoral. How could you hit that guy in the wheelchair?
How can you put a knee on someone's neck for
Exactly.
8.5 minutes?
How could you put a knee on that guy and choke him to death?
Right.
You win at the moral level of conflict. You know, Gandhi, when there was the scene in the movie Gandhi where they're marching up and they're just being beat, right? Just being beat, knocked out, and then another guy comes up and being beat, knocked out, beat, knocked out. The British won that fight. They knocked out everybody.
Yep.
And then they lost.
Yep.
They lost at the moral level of conflict. And what we're seeing now are people with moral values and moral strength and moral courage getting beat up by the police. And even though they're going to the hospital, even though they're being damaged, they are winning the moral war.
Yep, I agree.
And that's fourth generation warfare. And you're seeing it on TV. It's not called fourth generation warfare, but that's what's going on.
Right.
And the demonstrators may not even know they're doing fourth generation warfare, but that's what they're doing.
But I tell you, James, I got to thank you, because when I read your writings, it just made perfect sense. And it mirrored what I've learned about brainwashing techniques to disorient people so that they can be programmed into a cult. It's just on a massive scale, as you say,
Yeah.
because of the infrastructure, the media.
And they look at it, you can look at it like the masses, but they look at it, what does it take to get into your mind? And the technology now with the social media, I don't know if the social media can do anything, really, to tell you the truth. I really don't. But I started reading about propaganda. So I read Jockey Lowell and other people. And back in the days when propaganda was mass propaganda, I mean, you had a film, you put a film out, and maybe 10 people in the audience it resonated with, right? But now with social media, they collect your likes, your dislikes, what you share. They collect other information, and this is in political parts. They collect what car you drive, what magazines you subscribe to, what church you go to or don't go to. They collect all these pieces of information, and then they tailor the message to you.
Yep, exactly.
It's like when you read Trump said, not Trump, the Trump campaign, and they were talking about Cambridge Analytica. And they go, yeah, we ran 10,000 versions of this message. Sure, of course they ran 10,000 versions. One version was specifically for you. And then the guy across the street got a different message, a different word. If you were anxious, you got the word that made you anxious. If he was something else, he got the word, to be something else. It resonated with him. He needed security, you give him a security message. I need anxiety, you give me an anxiety message. Just what you do. Except now social media, the technology, not the social media companies, but the technology combined with psychological factors and marketing factors, tailor the message right to you. You're almost defenseless.
Well, unless you step back and understand the techniques that the influencers are using and separate the techniques that are being used with the substantive.
It's almost impossible. I would argue it's almost impossible. Because they know you better, they know you better than you know yourself. For example, one of the guys who did not get into Cambridge Analytica, but whose work sort of informed Cambridge Analytica, he said, we could look at your Facebook likes and predict your opinions better than your spouse could.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember also Mercer was involved, and I saw something, I don't know if it's true, that Mercer's sitting out this next election. I don't know if that's true, but we're kind of running out of time, but I need to ask you a question, and forgive me because it's a big topic. So maybe we can keep it short, but I know that you've studied the former Soviet Union. Can you comment at all on Russia and Russia's involvement in what we're experiencing?
Yeah, Russia is a very weak country. It's got a small economy. It doesn't have really that large a military. It's got a lot of nuclear weapons. It's dependent almost entirely on oil and gas, which is going out.
Yeah, fossil fuels.
So if you're sitting in Saudi Arabia and you're sitting in Russia, climate change activists are anathema, right? You got to destroy that. But
you have to promote it as a hoax.
It's a hoax.
Right.
But what Russia's doing is they cannot possibly compete against a European Union and United States and Canada and Japan and Australia, New Zealand on the level of technological innovation, on the basis of economic growth, on universities and developing intellectual knowledge. So what do? They start their own psychological warfare. They use John Boyd, recreate frictions, and then they use Donald Trump. it doesn't. I believe he's just instructed from Putin, but that doesn't matter. He doesn't have to be. They're
Mm-hmm.
already in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
They are already in his mind that he is a great president. I'm sure Putin tells him, Donald, you are a wonderful guy. You're the man. You're the man. Nobody's ever seen anything like you. He boosts his ego up, tells him, here's what I'm doing, here's what you might want to do. He's in his mind already. He doesn't have to be an agent. He's in his mind. He controls his perception of reality. And then Trump does what he does best, promote himself to the destruction of everything and everyone around him.
Right. So one last thing I want to ask you about
And they want to
QAnon.
destroy us. They want to destroy. I mean,
Russia wants to destroy us, but my understanding is Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church has been grooming the Christian right, making alliances with the Christian right, and the Christian right in America think he's a very religious man because they're anti-gay and anti, right?
The Russian KGB, when Paul Weyrich, and I don't think William Lynn went, but Paul Weyrich went about 40 times to the Soviet Union and then the former Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can almost guarantee everybody he met was either in the KGB or controlled by the KGB. And they understood what these guys were doing, what they were up to.
Yep.
And then they turned it all around and focused it right back in the United States.
Right.
Putin doesn't care one way or the other about religion. He really doesn't. He is a power-hungry guy. Stalin didn't care about religion until the Soviet Union was threatened, and all of a sudden he called the Russian Orthodox Church to his side. We got to defend Mother Russia.
Yep.
And then after the war, you guys go away.
Right, exactly. One thing that and then I'm going to let you go, James, that I've encountered over and over again in my talking with Trump believers and QAnon adherents is they all don't think Russia was involved in any negative way at all.
Yeah. Well, part of it is, Bill Barr got to spin the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation, as it was released, the redacted report, pulled its punches.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you read the unredacted portions, you go, wait a minute, they had Roger Stone dead to rights.
Yep.
He was I mean, the idea that Trump didn't know that the WikiLeaks was coming is absurd.
Yes, it is.
And so Mueller was this Boy Scout that you send to a fight. He had a great reputation, the whole bit, but he's like a myopic Boy Scout, and he's going into a street fight with no rules.
Yeah.
And he's going, well, I can't look at that. I can't look at that. I can't do that. I have to pay attention to this Department of Justice memorandum that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, who wrote that anyway?
Yeah, it's written.
And who said that they couldn't subpoena Trump directly and make him answer questions?
It's like I'm guilty. I will admit I'm guilty. I thought Mueller would be tougher and stronger, and it ended up Mueller was a pussycat.
Mm-hmm.
He really was a pussycat.
Yeah.
But there's also one thing that we don't know, and that's the counterintelligence part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's secret.
Mm-hmm.
And
So James, I want to do this again with you.
I will say one thing. Can I say one thing about the QAnon?
Of course, please.
I think it's absurd, but they do delegitimize the Democratic Party. It is fourth generation warfare because they're all pedophiles. If some Republicans get caught up in it, so what? It's not the Republican Party. It's delegitimizing the Democrats. And then if you think about where we go one, we go all, is really the Three Musketeers, all for one for all. Mm. You know that as a kid. Now you hear it resonates with you. It is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant because it gives you moral strength. And liberals, they look at QAnon and they dismiss it and debunk it. And of course, it's stupid beyond belief.
Right.
But where we go one, we go all is if you said that to an army, if you said that to the Spartans, if the Spartans had said, where we go one, we go all, you know what's going to happen.
They're going to march.
You can't dismiss it as being stupid when it is psychologically brilliant.
Yep.
and gives you such moral strength where we go one, we go all. We're all in. That's why you can't reason with them.
Yeah. So, again, I want to thank you for your good work. I wish that you could be teaching all of the media people and
Well,
encourage.
I can't, I don't do that. I don't expect to do that. Seth Abramson can't get on mainstream media. He's written 3 books. He can't get on the Maddow show to talk about it, what he knows. So I don't expect
Me
anything.
neither, by the way.
Yeah, and you don't either, and a few other people, just never get on the show, is to just keep writing and just trying to keep influencing people and explain to them, it's not I came up with Fortune Rate for Warfare, I didn't, but just to explain that we're in a war, we're in a conflict. One side wants to emphasize menace and anxiety and uncertainty, and what we have to have is moral strength, moral courage, moral, identity, and we can win. We can overcome whatever they throw at us.
And a coherent vision that
And
we
a
can.
coherent vision of what we are. And you see that in the streets. It's
Yeah.
not totally coherent, but it's coherent enough that you can see this is a multiracial America. This is the America I want to live in.
Yep.
This is the America that's strong. This is the America that, you can't waste a single child's mind, not one. Because we don't know who's going to be the next Einstein. He may not be Jewish, maybe Muslim. He may
Yep.
be a black kid, maybe a poor Chicano kid. You never know where the guy's going to go, wow, this guy just created an entire industry. Are you kidding?
Yeah, agreed. Thank you again so much. Steve Hassan here. It's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the super thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind, only you should control it.